run into town when all of a sudden the car came to a screeching halt without me ever touching the brakes. It literally slammed me to a stop. I don't know what it did. There was a loud pop noise, and then it allowed me to continue on. I got out after pulling over to the side of the road and could not see anything going on. There was no smoke. There was no leaking fluids. There was nothing to indicate what had just happened. I limped the vehicle back to Palmer, where I then had it towed over to a mechanic, who is now diagnosing what is going on with the vehicle. Well, as luck would have it, last week I happened to pick up a new vehicle. It's not new to me, but it is new to the channel. So I've had this Ford pickup truck sitting back in storage in Colorado for the last few years. I put it in storage with a friend of mine before moving up here. Now, I did buy my Ford Expedition, the one that is in the shop right now, right before moving up to Alaska. And the reason I chose to purchase that vehicle instead of driving this vehicle up here is because I do believe in having backups for backups. So this is my backup vehicle. The Expedition is larger on the inside, so it gave Kenai a place to be in the vehicle since I was coming up on the ferry, and I knew that he was going to be trapped in the car for 5 days on the way up here. But it also meant that I could keep all of my stuff in the back. I could actually get more stuff in the back of that Expedition than I could in the back of this pickup truck and keep it undercover, because I didn't want anybody going through my items while I was driving from Colorado up to Bellingham, Washington. And also I camped for 3 days in Juneau. So knowing that, and knowing that I was going to eventually need two vehicles up here anyhow, I decided to buy the Expedition and drive it up here and leave this one with a friend of mine who stored it, like I said, for the last few years. It was just time to get this vehicle brought up here. The Expedition had been acting up from the moment I purchased it, but it did get me through the last couple of years. So for that, I'm very, very thankful. But there was no telling on how much longer it was going to last. And now that it's in the mechanic's shop and they still don't know what's wrong with it, I am very thankful that I have this truck here.
Yes!
Another reason why I'm really glad that I had this vehicle shipped up when I did is because I have a friend coming up here in a couple of weeks, and we wanted to go do some exploring. With the Expedition acting up, there was no way that I felt comfortable doing a whole lot, especially going on any back roads. So having this here means that we'll at least have an opportunity to do some exploring while she's here without me being a nervous wreck or us potentially breaking down. I have more confidence in this truck than I did in that vehicle. But now that I'm home, I'm going to start working on planting out the greenhouse and adding some color to the front of the property. It is finally warmed up enough that I can get started planting in the greenhouse. And as you can tell, I added some planters. I decided to do this because filling up this entire space with soil just didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, considering I need a pathway in here because this is about 5 feet across from the wall to here. And also, the other reason for doing this is because, again, this is just a temporary greenhouse. So I didn't want to put in anything that is going to be a pain to remove. These will be fairly easy to empty out when the time comes. All I have to do is tip them over. The bottom half of these, well, not these cucumber ones, but the bottom half of these ones, which will hold my pepper plants, are actually filled up with rocks because pepper plants only need about 12 inches of soil depth. And the soil that's in here will seep down into the rocks a little bit, but also help provide some drainage. The cucumbers need a little bit more soil space, so that's why these ones do not have any rocks in the bottom of them. And I am putting in
some strawberry plants here in front of my cucumbers. Now, in order for these strawberries to do well, I do understand that I'm going to have to trellis the cucumbers really well, but I'm not too concerned about that. And this strawberry plant here is actually 2 plants, I believe. At least that's the way it looks on the surface. We're going to just separate these as I get bit by a mosquito here. All right, got them separated. Just go ahead and get those in the ground. I did go ahead and buy some soil mix because I wanted to ensure that I was going to get a successful crop out of these. And I know that I had used some Miracle-Gro raised bed soil in the other beds. And some of you have commented that that is a horrible soil to use and that nothing will grow in it. And I'm already seeing signs that that might be true. I've pulled off this morning some leaves on the brassicas that were bronzing, turning kind of a purplish coppery color. I pulled those off, and so my next trip into town I'll be getting some bone meal or some phosphorus to add into the soil, which will hopefully alleviate that issue. So this time I did buy Pro Mix, which I've added to these, and hopefully that will mean that I get a better crop in here and have more success than I might have out front. It's always good to take advice from others who maybe have experienced it themselves or know a little bit more than you. And I definitely don't know everything. So I'm planting some bell peppers and jalapenos in these taller raised beds. And then on the front or on the inside of them, I am going to be planting some zucchini. Now I understand that zucchini and cucumbers should not be planted next to each other because they attract the same type of pest. But I really don't have anywhere else to plant these little zucchinis. And so they are going in here with the bell pepper plants and jalapenos, and hopefully they'll do okay. Hopefully I don't have too much pressure from predatory insects. I'll also plant some marigolds in here and what have you to ward off any nematodes that are not beneficial. But also the one thing I'm really concerned about is if I get some powdery mildew or some type of fungal disease that could transfer because it's airborne to the zucchini. So that's something that I'll have to be on the lookout for. One thing is, during the day I do plan on having this open as long as the temperatures are high so that there's plenty of ventilation in here. But it is holding up rather well. Now I did make one change to the greenhouse, and that is that I pulled the plastic down over the nails that I put into the wall, and then I just tacked the plastic onto the wall itself, and that has helped to stabilize it. So that way, even if the support frame were to come off, the plastic isn't going to fall because it's actually attached itself to the cabin. I'm really excited to get these plants finally in the greenhouse. Working out here this morning, though, I will tell you it's been really warm. I think the high today is about 60 degrees. So I know 60 doesn't sound warm to many of you, but when you're used to cold temperatures 9 months out of the year, trust me, 60 degrees is incredibly warm, especially when you're underneath this plastic. In here with the zucchinis and the peppers and the cucumbers especially, I'm just going to put down a layer of some cedar shavings. These were provided to me by a friend of mine who planed a bunch of cedar, and then I'll just wet these down again to make sure they're really in there and they're not going to blow away in the wind. But that's just going to help to hold in some of the moisture, especially inside of this hot greenhouse. Hopefully by doing this, I am not encouraging rodents to come nest in these plants, because you know, cedar shavings is what they sell for hamster bedding and things like that. So fingers crossed I'm not creating a bigger issue here. course, I don't know how they would get up here unless they climbed up the plastic and dropped in, because this is that same roofing material that I showed in the greenhouse build. I just took 3 of those scrap pieces and snapped them together. So it's pretty slick. There isn't anything really for a rodent to be able to climb up to or on to get into these. But hopefully that'll help hold in some of that moisture. Here, the garden is actually really dry. So after I get these nasturtiums and the cilantro planted, then I'm going to go ahead and give the garden a deep watering. I really should have had these things planted outside already, but it's been so cold overnight that I don't think that most of these things would have survived. But I'm going to just intermingle these, basically alternating one in between the other in the front of the potatoes here. The potatoes are starting to push their way up. There's some little seedlings popping up in amongst the potatoes. I don't know if those are radishes or some of the mustard greens that I had in here last year, but I'm gonna leave them and see what develops. Now is when I am kind of impatient with the garden. It's not so much the garden itself as it is with how quickly the garden is drying out. I know that once the plants mature, they'll shade the ground. But right now, there's nothing providing that shade, and it's allowing the garden to dry out fairly quickly. And so I'm kind of impatiently waiting for everything to get tall and bushy and basically, like I said, shade the ground and provide some resistance to the sun and the wind. This is the part that I've been waiting for, to add some color in front of the cabin. Well, you saw I added a little bit of color in front of the cabin with those hanging baskets. But now I understand why people go for the vibrant red, because that pink is so washed out against the cabin. So next year I'll choose brighter colors. But as you can see by the selection of plants that I have in front of me, I do have at least a little bit of vibrancy here with these. I have a whole selection of plants here, starting with, have a couple of forget-me-nots. Forget-me-nots are actually the state flower for Alaska, but this variety is not that plant. This is a Victoria rose. It's a more pink color than the true forget-me-nots. And then I have some California poppies here. And then I have 2 different types of Linaria. I have a fantasy mix and then just your standard Linaria here. Very pretty. And then I have this plant here, which is Sunsatia. I need to get these things in the ground because they're starting to wilt. They're a bit dried out. But this is a beautiful little yellow flower here. I also have some white verbena, which is similar to the pink verbena in the hanging baskets. And then I have some daisies. Well, that's going to do it for today's video, as I need to get busy and finish stacking all this firewood that I've put off for the entire winter. But I hope you'll stick around for some outtakes. And as always, I look forward to seeing you in the comments, and I'll be back next week. Now, I do know that zucchini and cucumbers really should not be planted next to each other because they are of, they attract. Blah. I'll also plant some, what do you call it? Listen, ladies, when it's your tools, you can mess them up however you want. Ain't nobody gonna say anything except for when you put it out to the entire world that you just used a drill bit to open up a box of screws. But that's besides the point. Whether you've contributed through a YouTube membership, Patreon, PayPal, or you've donated to the channel in other ways, your support means a lot to me. So with that being said, that concludes today's video. I want to thank you for watching and joining me today. As always, stay safe and take care until the next time, and I'll see you then.